to the G5 Hive in our next installment of our Worker Bee series, where we deep dive into the G5 college football landscape with the folks that know the teams the best. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're listening to us in podcast form, please rate and review. Today, we'll be taking a look at the New Mexico State Aggies, who finished 10-5 last season. They capped off their season with an appearance in the New Mexico Bowl versus Fresno State. They wrapped up their 2024 spring practice with their spring game on April 6th. We have a special guest joining us today. He is the New Mexico State Aggies TV play-by-play broadcaster. You can catch him on TV doing play-by-play for the WAC, Conference USA, and NCAA championships. In 2018, he was tabbed top 30 sportscaster under 30 by Sportscaster Talent Agency of America. He is Adam Young. Adam can be found at YoungPBP on X. Welcome to the show, Adam.
Appreciate you having me. It feels like football is getting closer and closer, so excited to talk some football today.
Yeah, hopefully. New Mexico State, when do they start? Next week, 2 weeks?
Yeah, we're,
or New Mexico State.
Spring ball finished late April. Guys are still gone. I think they're still 2 weeks away, and then kicking off August 31st, yeah.
We are right around the corner. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what led you into being interested in sports broadcasting and ended up getting a gig there with the Aggies doing play-by-play?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to be a broadcaster since I was in middle school, really since I was a little kid. And, so this dream started a long time ago, and it's taken me to the Southwest. I've been here for 9+ years and honored to get the chance to do 7 different sports here. I've been the director of broadcasting for our property as well. And then, do a lot of freelancing gigs, and they allow me to do that. And you mentioned some of the stops that I've had doing that with some conference championships. I called the Division II National Championship last year for volleyball on television, and met a lot of great people along the way. And, forever grateful to have these opportunities that I get to call games.
Well, the Aggies have a new head coach. Jerry Killen resigned. He's now with Vanderbilt as a consultant. In his place is Tony Sanchez. Sanchez was previously the wide receivers coach there at New Mexico State. What can you tell us about Coach Sanchez and what he brings to the tables here for the Aggies?
Well, he's an alum, so that means a lot to the fan base and to the community. I mean, he played for the Aggies. He was a wide receiver in the 90s, returned 2 years ago as an assistant coach when Jerry Kill was hired. And we always said he was overqualified, I think, to be just the wide receivers coach because he has a really impressive resume. Going back to his days as the head coach at Bishop Gorman, which is a powerhouse in Vegas. Then he was the head coach at UNLV. So he's been an FBS head coach before. And that was crucial whenever, Jerry left, decided to step away and resign and eventually into an advisory role at Vanderbilt. They needed to make a hire really quick, especially with the way the transfer portal works nowadays. So to have a guy on your staff already like Tony Sanchez, I think it was a pretty easy decision to promote him. It's gone really well. I love what he did in the transfer portal. I know we're going to talk about some of the departures and some of the additions. And, right now, Jerry Kill used to always call it paper tigers. Whenever you recruited guys, you don't know what they're going to be until you get them on the field. They're paper tigers until practice starts, and that's the same right now. But I like what they have on paper. They're coming off one of the best seasons in program history, one of the best 2-year stretches in program history. So the excitement is high. There's, of course, question marks because there are so many newcomers, but really excited about the pieces they added both before spring ball and then post spring ball as well.
Well, often happens when you get a new head coach, that means new assistants and coordinators. The Aggies are no different in that regard. Coach Sanchez appoints Tyler Wright as the new offensive coordinator. He was previously the special teams coordinator and the tight ends coach there for the Aggies. Can you describe what type of offense that Coach Wright's going to bring and use here at New Mexico State?
Well, and we'll talk about this later too. Personnel-wise, it seems like the strength of the team is probably going to be the offensive line. So I do expect them to run the ball a lot, which is what they've done the last 2 years. Jerry Kill always had 4 or 5 running backs he could use, and it seems like they're going to have that again this year with a really talented, experienced offensive line. And then there are some question marks at quarterback. Who's going to be the starting quarterback? Will it be a couple guys early on in the year? Will somebody win the job outright going into the season? So I think going into it, it seems like it's going to be a run-oriented offense, but we've yet to see Tyler Wright as an offensive coordinator, so we'll kind of see that on the fly. And Tyler is he's a young coach, but he's a rising star. I've been really impressed by him the last couple of years on the staff. He did a really good job with special teams, did a really good job with the tight ends. They were used heavily in the offense the last 2 years, so excited what he does in this new role.
Well, let's get to the position where it all starts on offense, and that's the quarterback. Last year started Diego Pavia and the backup, Blaise Berlowitz, both off to Vanderbilt. They brought in Kentucky quarterback Deuce Hogan, and after the spring brought in UTEP quarterback Jake McNamara, and then Wake Forest QB Santino Marucci. What should we make of this quarterback room? You said there wasn't a quarterback one yet. Kind of what are you hearing and seeing about the starter there for week 1 against SEMO?
That's the position everybody's talking about because Diego Pavia, especially last year, I mean, he was the guy. 2 years ago, won the job early. Gavin Frakes stepped in for a couple of weeks. It was kind of in and out, and then Pavia was the guy late. Last year, you knew going into the year that Diego Pavia was the guy. And then he transfers. Him and Blaise Berlowitz both go to Vanderbilt. Eli Stowers was going to come back as a tight end. He goes to Vanderbilt as well. Eli was used a little bit at quarterback last year. And then Gavin Frakes goes to Virginia. So essentially your 4 guys at quarterback last year are gone, and you're trying to fill that room up with newcomers. Deuce Hogan, I think, is probably the biggest name in that room, right? I mean, he was at Kentucky. He's been at Iowa as well, but he hasn't played much at the FBS level as far as games are concerned. So, it's a loaded quarterback room in which they did add a lot of new pieces. Like they do have some guys who have played at the JUCO level, but FBS experience is a little bit light in that room. So, it's going to be so important those first couple of weeks of camp that somebody really excels at the quarterback position. I do think the offensive line is going to help because there is so much experience and depth and talent. That'll help that quarterback transition to a new quarterback, but that's certainly a room that has a lot of potential. It's just who will emerge as the guy if there is a guy going into the year.
Do you feel that Hogan has a leg up since he was there before there in the spring before everybody else comes in, learning that playbook and things like that?
I do think it helps, but Awad and Nunez were also there, and then Marucci was added post-spring ball. So they kept on adding. I mean, they were not satisfied, if you will, where they were coming out of spring ball at quarterback. So I'll be honest. I don't think anybody has an edge. I think it's an open competition going into camp, and whoever's at their best will win the job. And then we're going to see Tony Sanchez's style as a head coach as well, and Tyler Wright's style as an OC. Are they comfortable playing multiple guys in a game? That goes coach to coach. Jerry Kill hated that. He did not want to play 2 guys in a game, but sometimes he had to. And that's not really his style, but he did. So we'll see how they approach it. Last year, they had packages for Eli Stowers at quarterback. Even though Diego Pavia was exceptional, there were games where they pulled him, in the red zone or near the goal line, and they bring in Stowers to run the option because he was so effective in that role. So maybe they'll have somebody do that as well.
Well, let's move over to the running game. They lose about 77% of their rushing yardage from last season. What did the staff do to address those losses?
They did a really good job in the portal in that running back room because a lot of those losses were relatively late. Coach Langford, who was the running backs coach, was promoted to offensive coordinator at one point, and then he went to Vanderbilt, so he was really only the OC for a couple of weeks. But when he was promoted, it seemed like that entire running back room was probably going to stay because he was their running backs coach. A lot of those guys went in the portal. They were able to keep a couple. Monte Watkins is the guy to keep your eye on. Monte is one of the fastest guys around the country. Hasn't had a lot of carries. You would see stat lines for him sometimes where he'd have 4 carries for 90 yards in a game. Just didn't touch the ball a lot, but when he touched it, he was explosive. He was averaging around 12 yards per rush for most of last year. So I do think Monte will get more carries. He's the most experienced running back in that room as far as returners. Tim Gans is another guy who, when he's been given touches the last couple of years, he's done a lot with them. Lorenzo McMillan has been around for a handful of years. He's gone through a couple of coaching changes, and he's stuck around. And then they added a couple of talented running backs with high-level FBS experience in the portal. So I do think they have 4 or 5 guys that can carry the load behind a really good offensive line.
Well, what have you seen or heard with this new staff that you kind of expect those carries to get divvied up? Are we going to have an RB1 workhorse like we did last year, or will it be this committee approach? And if so, is that a 50-50, 60-40? You said there's 4 or 5 guys. Do they split up 20, 20, 20, 20, 20? Like what are you hearing, or what have you been able to see so far?
It's hard to figure out because some of those pieces they added after spring ball. So a lot of times you get a really good feel for what the team's going to look like and how things will shake out by watching spring ball. And with the way the transfer portal works, and with the portal reopening after spring ball, a lot of times it's hard to figure out. I do expect Watkins to get way more carries than he got the last couple of years. I do think that's something that will go up. The question is, how many carries can Monte Watkins handle during the course of a game? Is he going to get 15 or 20? Possibly, but he's only been getting 5 or 6 a game the last couple of years. And, he always finds a way to do something with them, but he's not that power back. He's more of a perimeter runner who gets out to the edge and uses his speed to his advantage. So how does he handle a long season as the go-to guy? But they do have options.
That's something, you might only get 5 carries and you're really productive with them. And then when you get 20, you're not as productive because, you got more of this volume base. Sure. And you also expect, you're not going to be as productive when you get 20 as, when you have maybe that 5, 8, 10 touches. So that makes sense.
And I go back to the offensive line constantly because this is the heart and soul of the team. And ever since I've been here, we've never said that about the offensive line. But Andrew Mitchell, who's the offensive line coach, has been amazing with that unit the last couple of years. So there's a lot of excitement about those guys and what they did last year and then what they can build on going into this year.
Well, the Aggies pass catchers will look quite a bit different here in 2024. Now, holistically speaking, I'm talking wide receivers, tight ends, running backs. They lost 8 of their top 9 receiving options. What will this room of pass catchers look like here in 2024?
Cordell David's a name to watch. Cordell has been around the last couple of years, and he's stuck with this staff. And, Cordell probably going into last year might have been the go-to guy. Statistically didn't put up the numbers that maybe he had 2 years ago, but he had some really good receivers around him. A guy like Trent Hudson, who transferred to Mississippi State, who had a really good year, especially in the red zone, catching touchdown passes last year. So Cordell's key. Donovan Faupel, who, if you and I talked this time last year, I would not have brought up Donovan's name, but he was a true freshman who bursted onto the scene and earned some playing time and did a lot with it last year. PJ Johnson has a world of talent. He's been around for a while. In fact, he was here 2 coaching staffs ago. And PJ is from Louisiana, just raw talent. He's as good as it gets, but he just hasn't played a ton game experience on the field. So, PJ is certainly a guy who could have a breakout year. They do have to replace a lot. Tony Sanchez was the wide receivers coach last year. So I do think he will still have a role with that unit, maybe more so than others, just because of his experience the last 2 years with that crew.
Now, based off of, what you saw last year, and I'm assuming maybe it'll carry over, maybe it won't to the offensive coordinator, but what can you describe for us how we expect to see these tight ends being utilized in Wright's offense?
That's a good question. And, last year, Tyler had 2 really good tight ends. Tomas Whitford was about as experienced as it gets collegiately. So Tomas was a leader, blocked well, caught touchdown passes, high character. He was everything you want in one of your go-to guys. And he was the number 1 tight end. And then Ron Tiavasue transferred in from Utah State, and Ron had a really good year. So they had two guys they could really count on last year. Trevor Stevens, if healthy, is the top returning tight end. We've seen flashes from him the last 2 years on what he can do. He battled an injury last year, and then they might need some other guys to step up. But, I think part of this, too, is how much will a Tyler Wright, Tony Sanchez offense use the tight end? Because Jerry Kill wanted to use the tight end a lot. But you go back to the coaching staff before Jerry, it was an air raid offense that didn't use the tight end. So it changes coaching staff to coaching staff. I do think they will utilize the tight end, and I think Trevor Stevens is the go-to guy in that group.
All right, so week one, lining up here at starting wide receivers and tight ends, is it safe to say it's that Stevens, David, Cordell David, Donovan, is it Falpel, and then PJ Johnson? Is that?
Well, I think it depends on, guys emerging. Like I said, Donovan Falpel, at this time last year, we weren't talking about him. And guys emerge in camp. And with the transfer portal, it's so hard to predict nowadays. If all those wide receivers were back, if the portal wasn't a thing, I think we'd have a clear vision for what it was going to look like. But part of this era now that we're in is what makes camp so exciting. It's an open slate for a lot of guys, right? I mean, there's a lot of jobs up for grabs. And, there's probably guys that we will not talk about today that end up having really good years because maybe they came out of nowhere. They were under the radar. Maybe they were a late addition and started to grasp the offense a little bit later than others. And, it turned into a positive for them.
Well, let's talk about this O-line, and we talked about it. On paper, this looks like the strongest unit on the offensive side of the ball. They bring back the entire O-line, which is, I think, in all of the episodes of the series that we have done, there's maybe been one other team that has everybody coming back. So this is not too many teams are doing this. And then they have another few others like deep that have played some meaningful snaps last year. Like, how did that unit look in the spring, and are they ready to roll in this new offense?
Yeah, I said earlier, this is the first time since I've been here where I've talked a lot about the offensive line going into a year, because I think that high of that group and their coach, Andrew Mitchell's their coach, and you talk about a unit all returning and not going in the portal. A big reason, and probably the key reason, is because their coach is still here, Andrew Mitchell, and those guys love playing for him. And he's added a couple other responsibilities, assistant head coach, run game coordinator, stuff like that. Kanan Yarrow is kind of the key part of that offensive line. He's the center. He's getting a lot of preseason accolades, deservedly so. He's a great young man, great player. And then Shiaz Pete at left tackle is a guy who a lot of scouts think will play on Sundays. He's 6'8", well over 300 pounds. I mean, he's a big dude, and he continues to grow. He was a little raw when he came here, and Andrew Mitchell's done just marvelous work with him. Louis Canepa had a really good year last year. Excited about what he can do in the future. Jacob Golden's another guy who transferred in last year from Boise State, who battled some injuries last year, but when healthy, he's really good. So that's why I'm so excited, too, about what the offense can do, what the run game can do, is because it all goes back to O-line play. And, if you said one sure thing going into the year, that's probably it. Like, I think the offensive line is going to be really good.
And you mentioned Pete. He was also CUSA first team all conference last year. So, I mean, he had his accolades there last year. Probably, comes back hungry this year, and maybe they'll be running the ball a lot to the left. I don't know. Yeah,
he is. You see him on campus, and it's hard to believe like how big he is in person. I mean, it's 6'8". It's all is 6'8", well over 300 pounds, and he's still improving. And he's really taken to coaching well. Good teammate. He's one of the guys that's being represented at Media Day today. So he's at Media Day at Conference USA for New Mexico State. Him and Buda Paletti are on defense. So excited about what he does this year and down the road as well.
All right. If you have to pick an offensive player to have a breakout type season in 2024, who would that be?
Oh boy. I'd probably say Monte Watkins, and that's, maybe an answer that, is an easy one because he did have a really good year last year in the limited carries that he had. I just feel like he's going to have a bigger role, and he's only touched on the surface of what he can be. I'm really excited to see what Watkins can do with double-digit carries consistently. It's elite speed. I know the coaches are glad he stayed, and he's the guy. And then if you wanted a second one too, I'll give you a second one. It's going to be another running back. Tim Gans has played a little bit, and when he's played, he always does something. And I think Tim will have a bigger role, and he's another guy too that could have a big year.